You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect horror films, both old and new, and we've been dedicating this current season to the late, great Wes Craven and his Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and we've been calling it the Nightmare Years in particular because I've been looking at his middle chunk of his film career, and we're kind of almost towards the end of our discussions on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise plus Wes Craven's films, and we're going to be doing that with what would be the seventh franchise installment film from Nightmare on Elm Street, which was called Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It was released back in 1994. But before we kind of get into the guts of our narrative discussion, I should introduce myself. My name is Saul Muerte. I'm the lead host of the podcast and for the series. And I'm joined in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise discussions with, once again, Oscar Jack. Welcome back, Oscar.
It is wonderful to be back, Saul.
So you've been on this journey with me so far, and as I said, we're 7 movies in. I've asked you this with every single one, but you've given us a background of going through that journey yourself, of watching these films when it was on a bit of a review, and you kind of watched them pretty much in one hit. At what point did you first see New Nightmare, and when did it come on your radar for the first time?
I saw New Nightmare, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, early. I saw it was maybe the third Nightmare film I ever saw.
Yes.
Which I would have caught, when I was about 15, 16, on kind of cable, Foxtel. I'd seen the original, I'd seen Dream Warriors, somehow missed all of the others. And I remember probably seeing it in chunks, seeing it in bits and pieces.
Yes.
And being really struck by it, and realizing that this was something really different.
Yes.
And that impression stayed with me for up until I was rewatching them and getting to sit down and rewatch this one in its entirety again for the first time in close to 15 years.
Yeah.
It's something I've been really looking forward to coming back to and rewatching.
I think that says a lot about the film too, because I'm sorry to interject, but I too have fond memories of this film. I'm not entirely sure if it was the third film I watched, but it was definitely the third most prominent one of the franchise that I remember. If somebody was to tell me, all right, name the franchise movies, this would definitely be the top 3 that I'd say off the top of my head. And I think that says a lot about the film itself as well. So anyway, so I was cutting you off. You were about to say something there, Oscar.
I think I saw this relatively in the infancy of my obsession with horror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a particularly good film for that, because it dives deep into into that world in this really kind of metatextual way that Wes Craven would go on to kind of explore further with Scream. I think this is proto Scream. Even though they do it in different ways, he's playing with all of those same toys with this kind of meta narrative and this so strongly as you kind of jump in and just realize Sarah, who was my companion for the first rewatch of this.
Yes.
I remember eagerly watching her face as this one started, because she knew nothing about it. We just watched Freddy's Dead. As we turned to this one. And I remember just kind of watching her face with eager anticipation. And when she realized what the hell this movie was, and she just kind of looked to me stunned, because anyone's ever made a movie like this.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing that was so different and refreshing about it. And we're skirting around it without actually really telling the audience about it. I mean, the podcasters that the people listening to our podcast who are familiar with the film itself would would know the ins and outs of this anyway. But for those that aren't familiar with the film, it's incredibly meta at a time when meta wasn't a cool thing or hadn't become a word in its own existence. It's self-referential, it's self-knowing. But more than that, it embodied the concept of the film itself is Freddy being manifested into the real world, as if like we have Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, we've got Wes Craven playing himself, all within the world of Hollywood filmmaking. Kind of realize the essence of Freddy is becoming pushed into our world, not in the world of fiction that we've become known of. He's breaking down the fourth wall, and yeah, and that to me was this film. Like when you look back at it, I'm watching it going, it was so ahead of its time in that respect, and I think I don't know whether I'm kind of throwing down the gauntlet. I'm throwing down the clawed glove early in this because I don't normally kind of state my position, but I feel like this film probably deserves more praise than it actually does get. I feel like it's a clever film. I was still impressed with it, I must say, when I've come back to visit it again, and I can only applaud the direction of Wes Craven took the film.
Well, he really kind of draws the line in the sand. This isn't a Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Yeah,
this is Wes Craven's new nightmare. He has come back and he has resurrected it in a way, in the own. I was going to say the only way you could, but like I don't think anyone else would have looked at where the series was and would have thought this was the logical step for it. It's really quite unique to him.
Yeah, it is. It's a stroke. To me, it's a stroke of genius. I just, it's hard. It's hard to talk about it, really, isn't it? Like it's as in like it's just so different from, and as such, it's often viewed as outside of the canon because it's such a different vehicle. You know, it doesn't follow the plot line that we've been following thus far, because it in a way does what, and I have often discussed what makes a good sequel, and part of that is that it has the essence of the original, but it has something new that you throw into the mix that can still sit within that previous world and be believable. And we always talk about how Aliens is probably the perfect example of that being made. But I'm wondering now, like in talking it through, that this is another really good example of where you can take a sequel in a completely new direction, but it still embodies what the original film was about. Yeah, it's really, I don't know. I am kind of praising it quite early, I must admit. But I'd be interested to get your final thoughts on it when we get to the end of it.
Yes.
But okay, so let's dive into the plot line. Let's talk about the narrative, and as we do that, some of what we're trying to hint at will hopefully become a bit clearer. And as we kind of splash this one wide open, really, if anything, the biggest nod, similarly to how the first Nightmare film opened, we get the creation of Freddy's glove as we're in the new Nightmare opening credit sequence.
Well, and straight off the back, like this is a really good-looking film. Yeah, the cinematography on this is gorgeous. Yeah, I would go so far as to say, and it's really from that first image as it's panning down this table of tools and bits and pieces as we think, as we've been kind of trained to believe. With Freddy, we see he's this fire burning, and we see his sweater, and he's constructing a metal hand, kind of cybernetic, kind of vibing on, it's very kind of like, I feel like the 90s was obsessed with the future, with the millennium right around the corner. You kind of get this kind of thing, and we, if you were just walking to this movie and you thought, hey, Wes Craven made a new Nightmare movie, you would think like, oh, it's opening like normal as it kind of goes on further and further, and the hand is chopped off, and we realize that we're on the set
yes,
of a new Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Yes.
with Heather Langkamp watching as her husband, who is a special effects artist,
Yes.
is operating the glove, and Wes Craven himself is in this movie within the first, it's within the first minute.
Yes.
That he pops through and he says how happy he was with it, and we meet Heather and her. It's surreal that her character, like calling her Heather.
Yes.
Because she didn't really have much of a film career other than Nightmare.
No,
and to see her here with her kind of her husband, who I believe in the real world was a special effects artist, or is rather.
Right.
Like it's all very much kind of pulled, but we see her husband, and her child.
Yeah. I want to say her. I don't know. Yeah, I think you are right. They are still together. I think his name was David Leroy Anderson, and he did the makeup for Nutty Professor and Men in Black, I want to say.
Hey, those are good special effects.
Yeah. I'm just naming a couple off the top of my head. Yeah, so, and this was around that time. So, yes, that would make sense. So, yes, it is kind of all to go back to what you're saying, is playing loosely with the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and there are more instances in this film of really bringing reality into the fiction of this film.
Yes,
and like playing with that line. As we kind of see them kind of all chatting and palling around, and something starts being quite odd, and the metallic Freddy glove seems to come alive as it starts slashing and chopping up the special effects crew. And Heather wakes up screaming from a nightmare as they wake up in their home to a earthquake kind of shaking the house.
That's
what's left is they look out the window and they see the pool water sloshing all over, and they look up and get those little tastes of what we've come to know, where she sees like an injury,
yes,
that she'd seen her son in her nightmare.
Yes.
But in this case, it's no longer. It's like they were in an earthquake. Like that so easily could have happened just there.
Yeah, that's right. I think the important thing there as well, just you kind of loosely mentioned, but her son Dylan is seen wandering around in the dream sequence. Is wandering around the set of the new Elm Street movie, and so we instantly have Heather in a maternal role in this, and that's going to be integral to the development of the film, because that's her whole angle, is to protect her son essentially from Freddy. So, but yes, to go back to what you were saying, she wakes up and from the dream wonders whether if the earthquake was real, or was it kind of the dream kind of cracking into reality essentially.
And she sees cracks.
Yeah, in the wall.
Cracks on the wall, kind of in the shape of his gloves. And the husband goes off to work, and she gets a call from what we find out is that she has a stalker who has kind of eased off now, but he's been calling and sending her things, which is something from her real life. Heather Langkamp had this kind of obsessive stalker, and Wes Craven had asked if he could include it into the film.
Yes,
and it's like, I'm so glad that she was kind of brave enough and confident enough to be able to bring that into the film, because I can imagine it would have been a really confronting thing to be playing around. But it really does. I feel like all of these little touches of the actual reality, all of these crosshairs kind of coming in, just make this movie, like, it just blurs its lines more and more.
Yes.
Between it being being a film and being kind of this weird, real world kind of thing.
Absolutely. And importantly, like, there's a couple of things at play here with the prank phone call as well, is that one, it kind of does sound a little bit like Freddy. And to me, this was also the first precursor of what would be Scream.
Absolutely.
As well. Like, that was the one moment where I went, oh my God, this is like got so much of that coming out. Because, well, what did I say this was, what year did I say this was released at? 94. So we're like 1 year away from Scream being released.
96.
Oh, damn. All right. Okay.
So there's a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah.
But the fact that he went straight into it.
Yes. Well, it would be his next feature film as well. So that you're right. So he probably went away, wrote it, and then came back with Scream, as you rightly pointed out, 1996. The next scene, Heather turns up at a kind of talk show that's being filmed, the morning talk show, and they're discussing the 10th anniversary of the Nightmare films. And then part of the talk show lineup is Robert Englund, who kind of appears and he rips into the through the backdrop scene and kind of does the whole hammed up thing, and he's in full
Freddy makeup, and
that's right,
surprises.
Yeah, and it's all done in this really, like, again, like what was great about the first Nightmare film is that blurring of dream and reality. So you kind of, from Heather's point of view, she's questioning what's real and what's not, and she looks around at the audience who are all wearing Freddy costumes and this real kind of surreal feeling, and like she feels like she's under attack or being under attack or not safe at all.
It's really nice. It's really nicely done.
Yeah.
As we go straight into the next scene, and Robert Englund's out of the makeup and he's signing autographs for kids, and they go to he and Heather get to have a little walk and talk.
Yes.
And it's really wonderful to get to see these two actors together on screen in a way that isn't antagonistic.
Yeah, that's right.
Like you can see their real relationship, which is the thing, is that so many real people are in this movie who have this relationship from the first movie.
Yes.
Not only Wes Craven and Robert Englund, but we even get Robert Shea of New Line Cinema playing himself.
Who pops up in the next scene.
Which is just absolutely there. That's right. She gets a call and they bring him straight over.
Yes.
Straight over to New Line, which is just like this movie. My friend Sarah just kept on looking over to me being like, what's going on? And I'm like, that's the dude, that's the producer, that's the head of the studio, like the actual dude. Which is just I just can't wrap my mind around this. This movie is so insane for doing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But Bob is telling her that, they're he wants to talk about Wes, and that they're working on a new script. Wes didn't write any nightmare scripts because he hadn't had any scary nightmares, but he started having nightmares recently.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
Which gives Heather pause.
Yes, it does. That's right. Because so Bob's basically saying like we're going to do a new and final Nightmare film. And I wonder if that says a lot about the previous one too. That there's this need to do another Freddy film because the last one wasn't so good.
Sure. Yeah. They even say during the talk show when the talk show host says, is Freddy really dead? And
yes,
Heather says, Freddy's dead.
Yeah.
They just keep on dropping in the title of the last movie.
Yeah, that's it.
Even though we're all sitting down, we've all bought our tickets and our popcorn and snacks, and we're watching a whole new one here, right?
Yeah, that's it. So yes, and to go back to what you were saying, it gives Heather pause for thought, and she decides at that stage she doesn't want to do it because she's having nightmares of her own, coupled with the phone calls, and and her son's been showing some strange behavior too. So she doesn't want to be a part of it. And then Bob Shea basically says like her husband is going to be working on the film. He's agreed to create this new glove for Freddy. And Heather's just a bit like, I can't believe he's doing that. But so she's a bit pissed off by that, by him being involved without her knowing.
Well, and this scene here is where our kind of sense of eeriness expands from just Heather.
Yes.
Because she starts saying, has anything weird happened while he's been writing? Any weird phone calls or nightmares? And Bob Shea, like, hats off to him because he's good in this movie. Like,
he really is.
She says, have you getting any nightmares or phone calls? And you just get this kind of like far off look, and then the phone starts ringing. And his eyes kind of look to it, and she asks, "Why aren't you picking up the phone?" And you can see him just kind of be like, "Oh, whatever," like that's what I pay people for,
That's right. And then Heather gets home, and that's when she discovers her son has had this kind of episode, and he does the scary voice of going, in a kind of voice saying,
"Never sleep again."
Yeah. I guess, like, for me, it's always hard with casting kids in films. I think that, if anything, this was the one area that I didn't buy into. I found it too cliche. So if I'm going to be critical of this movie, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the kid, it's just hard. Like, we've seen many possessed kid films.
Sure.
And you just do a kid with a funny voice, like in Pet Sematary or what have you. It's
Danny Torrance, as
even that, like,
as the grandson of the creepy child.
Exactly. So anyway, look, I guess I don't know whether I'm being too mean on that. I don't know. But for me, that was one area I was like, Heather's really quite worried now. So she asked her husband, Chase, to come home because he's currently away doing another film set. And he agrees to. But in doing so, he falls asleep at the wheel on the way home. And we're led to believe that he died in a car crash.
Yes. And we see the glove that he was working on disappears.
Yes, that's right.
As they're kind of driving along, and we set up that her son is scared of the scary man.
Yes.
He set up his T-Rex toy down the ends of the bed,
which I love. I actually love that. I think that's cool. I love the whole idea of the toy protecting them in their sleep.
Yeah, it's it's taking this idea that that we have all had as kids of this, my toy will protect me.
Yes.
My blanket will protect me.
That's it.
And she kind of goes under the sheets, and there's a line that I really like where she says, "See, nothing wrong," and he looks to her and she says, "It's different when you're not here."
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I'm a little bit more probably forgiving of the kid.
I liked him there. It's just when he does the possessed talking bit.
Oh yes.
It's that I like. There's nothing. That's what I meant by I don't want to be cruel about the kid, because he clearly can act. Because the other moments he's brilliant.
Yes.
It's just that it falls into that cliche territory, I guess. I don't know what other way you would be able to portray that though. But to me, that's just where that kind of area fell into. But
we do
quite hard.
We see. Sure, yeah. We see with the father though. We get kind of a little nod to the bathtub scene.
Yes,
where we see the glove, kind of the knife comes up and like very gently, like just itches his crotch.
Yeah.
As he kind of reaches down and kind of gives himself a scratch.
Yeah.
Which is a nice inversion of that.
Yeah.
Which even like for 1994, I feel like is like quite different,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's you really kind of wouldn't have seen it, and then it kind of bursts out and gets him, and he crashes, and the next scene we have the cops kind of coming to the door and telling Heather that that her husband's been in a crash and that he's passed away.
Yeah. Just to pause there as well, just on that bit where the actual glove finally does come through the seat, to me it was a massive nod to Jaws and the fin coming out of the ocean moment. But in this instance, it's the claws coming out of the seat essentially, and I thought that was really cool. But yes, anyway, as you said, the cops turn up and to basically say that that Chase has been killed in a car crash, and Heather goes to identify the body, and that's where she can kind of see that it looks like there's claw marks in his chest, and the dude that's working in the morgue is trying to kind of hide it, but she kind of can tell that there's like a claw-like mark on his chest essentially. Her son gets even more weird and acts strange and stuff. Does the funeral scene happen next?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
Because the reason I mention that is this is where there's a few more kind of bit players thrown into the mix as well, because we have Nick Corey, sorry, massive mind blank, but he was in the original film. He was the guy that played Rod in the original Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Oh, right.
So he's there grieving. Plus Tuesday Knight, who played Kristen in the full film, is also there grieving in the funeral scene. So I know it's just like it's a throwaway cameo moment, but that slight finesse in the detail makes the film even more grounded in this kind of real world that we're watching it in. I thought that they're literally like, it's probably like 20 seconds, 30 seconds of film, if that.
Super small. I remember reading that that Wes wanted, that he didn't ask Johnny Depp because he didn't think he'd do it, but bumping into him after had mentioned it to him, and that Johnny Depp would have done it. And I don't know how much fact there is, because Johnny Depp pops up in the last one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
a little one-on-one. But I guess this is a few years later, and he's perhaps kind of getting a little bit more steam. But like having all of these actors from the previous films playing themselves. Robert's there with his wife, and Bob Shaye's there, and these little shots of all of these people,
and more importantly, John Saxon's there.
Yes. Who plays a pretty decent part in this movie.
He does.
And I think the thing that I really just love is watching all of these people who have worked together on multiple films, and just like their relationship really comes across.
Yes, that's
like
right.
They all just have such lovely, warm, connected chemistry together.
Yeah, it's genuine.
It's so genuine.
Yeah.
Which is one of I think the elevating factors of this film.
Yes.
Is that it's not like they're using non-actors. It's because there's only been, what was that? I was listening to something about the Ocean's 12 movie, where they have Julia Roberts playing Julia Roberts in the movie, because Julia Roberts' character looks like Julia Roberts.
Yes.
And that I think is an incredibly less successful version of this. Or like, even going along with, like, say, being John Malkovich.
Yeah.
Like, this is before that, and I think that's probably the closest.
Yeah, you're probably right.
In terms of, I could imagine. I'm sure they were developed separately, but this is the first of this kind of instance that at least I'm aware of. Of this kind of thing.
I agree.
But
what am I trying to say? I don't know if anything like this had happened before. I'd like to say it hadn't. I don't want to put myself down and confirm that as a definite thing or not. I just know from my point of view, I've not seen anything like this until this point. Yeah. So then, and talking of that kind of genuine relationship, this is the next scene is where Heather then goes to see Wes to basically ask for him to make some sense of what's going on. And this is a great scene. I love this. This is Craven basically is explaining that he doesn't really know much more than she does. Other than that, he kind of keeps dreaming these scenes up each night, and then he wakes up and writes them down. And then he goes on to tell her that in the script he's been writing, pure evil can be defeated if it is effectively captured in a work of art. And that's how he's trying to express himself through that. And that's where Freddy was kind of being reawakened in his mind, I guess. And he explains that this evil is for him is this form of Freddy Krueger. He says that Freddy sees Nancy. And here I go, I'm blending the two worlds already. He sees Heather as the gatekeeper, keeping Freddy at bay, because it's Heather's character Nancy that defeated him originally. Even though in the third film, Freddy defeats Nancy, somehow it wasn't able to release him. So it's almost like it wasn't enough to defeat her in the fictional world. He has to try and come out and defeat her in the real world.
And also the fact that it has its kind of jab at the later sequels.
Yes.
Because Freddy no longer scares the public.
Yes, that's right.
And so he has kind of lost, as a kind of plug, he's lost his power.
Yeah.
To hold back this kind of, and we have seen in the funeral scene, we get this little glimpse of what our Freddy looks like in this movie.
Yeah, he did. Yes.
That's not gooey, and he's not really burnt either.
No,
it's
not.
It's there's almost like a sectional flayedness to it.
Yes.
And his eyes are a little bit demonic, but we only kind of briefly see him as Heather has a bit of a momentary nightmare.
Yeah, and where he pulls the body down under in the
yes, and tries to pull her son down.
Yes, that's right.
But she's able to kind of pull him up.
That's right.
And as more and more of these elements, she kind of realizes that this is a real thing that's happening. So she's sitting on her bed doing her research, and she's got her coffee maker on the side of her bed, just like she does in that first one. Where she gets out of bed and pulls up the percolator out, and in LA, these earthquakes are just continuing to happen.
Yeah.
And all of her, Robert Englund, she has a conversation with him, and he's been painting a lot and painting Freddy's face. And I believe originally in the scripts, they were going to have it that Robert Englund was going to die in a car crash.
Okay.
And I like that they didn't add that. I think you didn't need that, and also that would have been a weird thing to have a real person die. I like that they just kind of that they're all kind of picking up on there's something really weird happening.
Yes.
And we keep on seeing these little her child keeps on seeing on the TV is that original movie
watching
playing.
that one clip over and over, doesn't he?
Yes.
And that's, I think,
all of these little bits and pieces.
Scene is where she wakes up and realizes Dylan's not there, goes down, and he's having one of those episodes.
Yes, and we get his kind of creepy Pet Cemetery moment where, which not so much the voice, but he's taped knives to his fingers as he kind of runs towards her, and that each time I watch it, I find it incredibly unsettling. For the same reason, that the Pet Cemetery thing is creepy. with a child running to you with a knife is incredibly frightening. Because of that kind of like unpredictability. It's almost like the kind of adage where, you know, like a black belt is more worried about fighting a white belt than another black belt, because a white belt you don't know what they're going to do. There's no kind of sense or reason or logic to the movement. It's you know, like a child is just like you have no idea. It's just it's kind of very off-putting.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's kind of it is a really freaky moment, and I'd forgotten about the gloves bit. That was kind of a cool touch. And then, but this is where Heather takes Dylan to the hospital because she's kind of worried about what's happening. The doctor asks if Dylan's ever said anything during the trance, and she says no. But the doctor then gets it out of her later on that he's been doing like these Freddy impressions, and she kind of judges her at that point, kind of going, "Are you letting him watch your films?" And then we.
And there is an element of like, every single person in this world knows Heather Langenkamp.
Yeah.
And where they're all, you know, everyone's kind of like, oh, your movie's like she's, not to talk like, you know, to speak ill, but, you know, they kind of build her up to be kind of like a more public, more common public figure instead of just a kind of a horror icon. And I mean, like, I really love Heather Langenkamp in this movie.
I do, yeah.
I think she's really something. Playing herself, and particularly when she played Nancy, she was so young. I feel like a lot of young actors, you can see what she brought to that role.
Yes.
From her own kind of self.
Yes. Yes.
But Dylan's, staying at the hospital in a tent and, doing more kind of Freddy voices, more Freddy possessed voices. There's one point where he spits up bile at her, covering her in blackness, freaking out, and Heather keeps on, being more and more kind of unhinged around all of these people, kind of building up, which is nice because, you know, they're going to turn against her down in the film. So it's nice to have that build up of all of them kind of being like, are you okay? And it not just being like a flick of the switch.
Yes. That's right. And they question her sanity as well, and because I think they see the marks on her hand too, so they think, on her arm, sorry, and they think that she's self-inflicting, self-harm. So they really start questioning her sanity, while she's probably questioning her own sanity too. But there's another character I kind of had forgotten as well in this period too. There's the babysitter, Julie, who's been in and out early on.
Who is essentially she's our teenage character. She's the character that she's she could have easily been one of the main cast of any of the sequels. Yes. And she's also I think Julie. Julie's her name.
Yeah, Julie.
I think she's a really likable character. She's really, particularly after the husband's death, she's on, she's there to really help, and she's really on their side, and she really cares about Dylan and for Heather. But I think jumping back just a little bit, Heather has a fight with Freddy. She's kind of had more and more now dream encounters with them. Yes. And from this last one in the hospital, she's actually gotten a streak of grey through her hair.
That's right. Yes,
like she had in the first one,
and in the end of the first one. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about it too. Yeah, I'm jumping around a lot. Sorry. Going with the Julie character though. She's played by Tracy Middendorf, and I'm mentioning her because for years, right, I had this recollection of a female character kind of trying to protect a kid. And I couldn't remember. I was like, I'm sure it was from a franchise, and I think I had a bit of a crush on her when I first watched it, to be honest. And I had this vague memory, like, did I dream that? Did I just make that up? Because I kept trying to work out what franchise it was. Because I'm like, what's one where it's a kid, you know? And I kept thinking Child's Play in my head. And it's weird when I came around to watching this again. I was like, oh my god, that's her. So I haven't just invented this woman up. It's she exists. So I had a moment of that kind of going around in my head. But anyway, so that's a little window into my own soul. So the Julie character turns up at the hospital right at the point where Heather really needs her, because Heather's been pulled away from Dylan because the hospital staff are questioning Heather's sanity.
Yes. They think she's using drugs and self-inflicting, and is basically, not fit to be looking after her child right now.
Yes, that's right.
But she have it.
Yeah, that's it. So she gets pulled away by the lead doctor to be questioned. But just before that, Julie kind of does indicate that she's been having dreams about Freddy too. So that's kind of like a bit of a window, a little bit of a precursor as to what's about to occur.
Yes.
Anyway, so Heather's been pulled aside, and we've just got Julie left alone with Dylan. At which point, two nurses come in to try and sedate Dylan. And Julie tries to put up a fight and tell them not to, because Heather's said he's not to fall asleep. But they kind of do a bit of a switcheroo on her as she's trying to stop one. The other one sneaks in and injects Dylan. And then Julie goes a bit kind of territorial and starts punching the nurse and
kicks them out of the room and shuts it up. And
right.
in a moment where, I feel like you really get behind her. We always love, it when someone starts kicking it to an oppressive authority.
Yes, that's it.
Just further solidifying their bonds to our main characters.
That's it.
But unfortunately, we don't have Julie for too much longer, because
we don't.
Dylan kind of drops in and Freddy, wearing his hat. And
he does. Just before we get to that, though, I just want to mention one of the nurses is actually played by Wes Craven's daughter in real life. So a bit of a cameo from her.
Right, great.
He plays one of the nurses in there. But yes, as you were saying, so Freddy appears, and we've only seen this from Dylan's point of view, though, so he can see Freddy, but Julie can't.
No, and we get a death incredibly reminiscent of the first film, as Julie is dragged up the wall and onto the roof.
Yeah.
Yes, which is, and Dylan even reaches out just like Amanda's boyfriend did in that first film.
Yeah, that's right.
As they both kind of reach out for each other, and she's kind of taken care of, and her body's dropped back down, and he turns and screams Rex. He's screaming for his toy. And one of the elements of how Heather was trying to calm him down was saying, home's right over. It's just over the highway. Yeah, it's just on the other side of the highway.
Yes.
Which she quickly realizes. She calls up as she's kind of driving around. She realizes that Dylan's running across the highway as he sees. And this is the scene with probably the jankiest of the effects.
I thought that when I watched it.
We have Freddy in the clouds, and Dylan's kind of running across, and it's kind of kind of badly composited.
Yes, it really,
There's only a couple of and then a big glove kind of lifts him up over a car and swoops him across.
That's it.
That's the particularly bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, at this point, like, Heather is in full battle with Freddy. You know, she's screaming for him to take her, not him, and
That's
like, she knows everything that's happening. Yeah, there's a lot. She ducks under like a semi-trailer that's going, you know, swooping past, and
just before that pursuit happens, Heather calls up John Saxon. And basically confides to him and says, like, this is what's going on. He's run away. There's stuff happening in the hospital and all this stuff. And he also is arriving on scene to kind of try and help, right? So Heather gets home, despite the near misses on the freeway. And when she gets into the house, she finds Dylan, but he's not home alone. Like, John Saxon's there. But this is where things start to blur a little bit, because John kind of comes out. He's asking her if she's okay, and she's like, I don't know. I don't know what's right or wrong anymore. I'm really confused. Yeah. And as he's trying to comfort her and kind of says, to her, everything's okay, he steps into a car, and then he calls her by the name Nancy as he drives off, and all of a sudden he's in the police car. And he's effectively become Lieutenant Donald Thompson again. He's no longer John Saxon as he drives off. So the worlds are really merging and warping together at this point. That's right. And then she turns around as well, and then she sees her house has turned into the house on Elm Street as well. The house, and she realizes what's kind of happening and realizes this is the game they're going to have to play. So just as he's leaving, she kind of looks to him mildly resigned and says, "I love you too, Daddy." Yes, that's it. Yes. Which is great. We love watching, we love watching. It's great. Nancy's always been just this like this character with such gusto, and such fight, and such a smart character, and like inventive, and just always got so much ingenuity. And just to see her be like, okay, yep, Kruger, let's do it then. This is the way it's oh god, yeah. And when you have that reveal of the house, it's great. The movies, the first movie's playing on the TV inside. And, that's right. It's towards the end there. It's not plugged in. And she starts finding all of these little breadcrumbs that Dylan's left. Yes. As she realizes all these little sleeping pills. Yes. She realizes she takes one and follows under and goes under the sheet as it kind of goes into she falls down a slide into a like Freddy satanic dream monster, very reminiscent of the set from the very beginning. It is essentially the set from the beginning, but only to the point expanded. But to the point where you almost start going, "Oh, hold on, are we watching the film within the film?" You start asking yourself that, going, "Oh, are they about to flip it and go? Is it going to be like a Holy Mountain kind of thing of like we pull out?" Yes, like the Get Shorty ending of exactly. Like, we've just been watching the movie. They're going to all call for rap. Yeah, that's it. So you wonder if she pull that out. In this temple, she finds the script. She does. Yes. For this movie that we are all watching. Yes. Which is another one of those elements where you're just like, yeah, like what's like I can get people not. I can get that this movie is very meta. Yeah, very much so. It was so ahead of its time, man. So yeah, and yeah, you're right. So and there is this confrontation between Freddy and Nancy that occurs. Dylan's there too, and he's trying to run away from Freddy. Heather gets knocked out. So like Dylan's kind of left defenseless on his own, and this is where Freddy's trying to lure Dylan into a trap to attack him, and that's when Helen discovers, as she comes back into the scene, fights off Freddy. They get him into the boiler. Essentially, is the way.
Yeah,
lure him in.
Well, it's the whole Hansel and Gretel thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. He hops into the oven and kind of reaches in after him. We get some great we get some good Freddy tongue work.
Long tongue. I love that.
Oh, the longest tongue of the series as it snakes around her whole body.
Yes.
And Dylan kind of, we see he grabs the end of it and he grabs a knife and is trying to stab it. And the tongue is trying to weave out of the way, but he kind of plonks him down. So it does, even though this kind of this demon Freddy is less campy, there are these
moments of
it's these moments of fun.
Yes, that's right.
Of with the stabbed tongue, he has now the forked kind of snake tongue as they kind of lock the doors in behind him, and the furnace starts up, and
yes, that's it. And he's realizing he's the one that's been caught in the trap, and it is like the giant oven, like you said, from the Hansel and Gretel kind of ending. And he kind of realizes he's going to kind of be engulfed in flames, kind of almost reliving out the end of his existence anyway from before he became Freddy. So he was born in flames and he's going to die in flames. Dylan and Heather kind of escape the blaze and they kind of work their way back to reality. And that's where they find the script of the film that Wes Craven working on is there, and in the bed, right. And so she picks it up, and the kid's like, "What's that?" She goes, "Oh, it's kind of like a story." And he says, "Can you read it to me?" And she has
Wes has gotten written on it. He's got, "Thanks for having the guts to play Nancy one last time.
Yes,
at last, Freddy's back where he belongs."
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Which is awesome. There's so much in that one line, and so she begins to read to her son, saying, "We open on an old wooden bench. There's fire and tools, and a man's grimy hands building what soon revealed as a gleaming set of claws. And the claws are moving now, as if awakening from a long and unwanted sleep." And we get closed credits. Yeah. So
as it just pulls down the hallway.
That's it. Yeah. So I already kind of said where I was with it, but to repeat, I really love this film. I think it's so much going for it. It was so refreshing, so ahead of its time. I just love the fact that not only did that everyone was on board for it. The players were all on board for kind of creating it, and they had to have the key players there in order for this to work. The whole Bob Shea thing, and there was also I completely forgot to mention that Lynn Shay is in it too. She's she's a nurse with the pill in it as well. So she played the teacher in the original film. And obviously she's the sister of Bob Shea, and people may know her more from the Insidious series these days. But even she crops up in it. It's just it's just to me, it's so beautifully woven together.
It's a family affair.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and it is. This is the swan song that Freddy should have got, rather than Freddy did. And so I'm so grateful for this being in existence in the franchise for that alone. I'm sounding like I'm gushing a little bit, and I apologize for that, but I just forgot how much I really liked this film until I watched it recently, and I And also, I think like that early 90s period was a bit of an awakening of horror. I'd always been a fan of horror, but I kind of this for me, I was going down that rabbit hole of watching like The Craft and the movies like that came out in the mid 90s. This was a point where I was going to the flicks as often as I could. And so I suddenly remembered, obviously that was when I watched it. I'd gone to see it in the movies. And so there was a bit of nostalgia that kind of started coming up and was awakening in me when I rewatched this recently. So yeah, it felt right. And I love rewatching it again. It'd been a long time since I'd seen it. And yeah, I enjoyed that ride. But what was it like for you? Like, what was your reaction after watching it for the first time?
For the first time, I loved it.
Yeah.
At that time, I was just completely blown away with it. And I think like even beyond the first one, this is the thing that had the biggest claw in me.
Yes.
For the Nightmare series. And was the kind of thing that kind of like made me want to go back into it and kind of like see what I hadn't seen. And I think it's such a wonderful it's such a wonderful ending to it. Not to the kind of the main series. There are some sort of stepchildren entries later on, but like having Wes Craven come back and get to put his ending on, like the fact that he got to make 3 of these, I think is really phenomenal. And I think the 3 of them like work as a triple feature. Incredibly well. And actually at the Astor here at the old Vintage Cinema, they had the original and New Nightmare as a double feature.
Oh, nice.
Which unfortunately I wasn't able to stay for the second one, but that's where Sarah and that's where she, we went and saw the first one. She'd never seen it there, and that kind of kicked the whole thing off of us getting to watch it all together.
Yep.
And I remember just kind of going through like, yeah, those are the 2 you get to watch. It's almost this like a more meta version of what they're doing a lot nowadays say like Halloween and the original Halloween and the new Halloween, of this kind of like cutting out the junk and just making a sequel. Because even though they acknowledge it is like a sequel to the first one. That's the only stuff that the only connections that really matter.
Yes.
In it. And I agree with you. I think there's so much there. I understand if it's not, some people's cups of tea, because it really is something really different. But that's just why I love it so much.
Yeah, and that's where I'm coming from too. And I think that's a good point you make too there, Oscar, because if people were coming out to see an all-out blood and guts slasher film, this isn't it. It's just a very clever nod to the franchise and the business and Hollywood, and turning it on its head,
and very atmospheric.
Yes.
Which is what the first one had in spades, that got left behind.
Yes.
Whereas this one, there's so much kind of intrigue and investigation, and just kind of ramping up this kind of eerie sense of something awful coming.
Yes.
Which is what the first one does so well, and just gets completely abandoned in the vast majority of the rest of them.
Yes. Yes, that's right. So the thing that was interesting in that too is that Heather Langenkamp actually pointed out that Freddy's not actually in the film that much either, relatively speaking. So it's the threat of him is that he's there without being seen, if that makes sense. It's the threat of him that makes it sinister. Robert Englund actually said that this was one of his favorite Nightmare movies, and and he went on record saying that he thinks it stands the test of time, which leads me to my next question: is like, do you think it still stands the test of time?
I think absolutely. I think it stands so strongly as like, I feel like, you know, you show someone this and you say, you know, it kind of uses all of these kind of elements that I feel like audiences now would be a lot more savvy to. But you show them this and you say, well, this was done 94. You know, you show them kind of where it sits, and I mean, even just showing my friend Sarah, like, she was blown away that this is what it was. Because even though it has been this amount of time and we've had movies that have kind of skirted it, we've never had something like this where like a sequel to a film, but it's set in real life with the same actors playing themselves, having played those characters, and it's kind of just really a really remarkable film. I couldn't recommend it high enough. But definitely, like, you'd have to do it with the first. You need the first.
You need without that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
You need either to have a relationship with the series, or to, you know, you can just watch the first one and this one. You can watch those two and it works because, you know, there's enough pop culture savviness and penetration that, you know, that people know who Freddy Krueger is. You know, people kind of, you know, get enough that you don't have to watch the whole series to appreciate what this one is.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think I would recommend it too. But I do agree with you. It doesn't work without the first one in there, and obviously, if you've watched some of the other in the series too, it only just champions where Freddy was at that time and place. And the fact that they were bold enough, the filmmakers and Wes Craven were bold enough to push it in a completely different direction as well. That would have been, and Bob Shaye and New Line Cinema were willing to go there. I think that's an awesome approach. Yeah.
Having Bob Shaye be that champion for this series. Being like, you can just see his loyalty to Wes. And to the series. That's right. Because, you know, New Line is the house that Freddy built. That's it. You know, there's no Lord of the Rings without Freddy Krueger.
That's right. Cool, man. I think that on that note, that's a good place for us to bow out, because it's not the last time we would see Freddy. In fact, do stick around, because as I said, we're coming to the close of our season, but we are going to come back and look at the joining of the two powerhouses of the horror franchise under New Line, and that would be when Freddy versus Jason came together. And we will look at that particular one, and we'll also look at the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street too. Until then, you know, as I said, stick around. Let us know your thoughts. Where does Wes Craven's New Nightmare sit for you? Did you enjoy it at the time? Do you find it as refreshing as we did? Let us know your thoughts. Until then, I'm your host, as always, for the podcast series. My name is Saul Muerte, and I was joined for the franchise discussions by Oscar Jack. Goodbye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.